Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular council meeting of Tuesday, November 1st, the last council meeting for this term of council. I'll call the meeting to order and ask if you will stand and join me in O Canada, please. Thank you. Item 2.2, can I get Councillor Deputy Mayor Richardson a motion for the adoption of the open session agenda, please?
Thank you, and through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Vail, that the agenda for the open session of the regular council meeting of Tuesday, November 1st, 2022 be adopted as circulated.
Thank you. All in favor? That's passed. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in anything on today's agenda? Seeing none, I need a motion for the regular council meeting of September 27th, 2022, that the minutes of that meeting be received and adopted, please. Councillor Elmsley, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. All in favor? That's passed. Planning Advisory Committee. There's no 5.1, there's no correspondence regarding planning. Planning Advisory Committee minutes. Are there any extractions from the Planning Committee? A couple of pretty straightforward reports. Can I get a motion that the minutes of the October 12th, 2022 Planning Advisory Committee meeting be received and the recommendations included in section 5.3 of the agenda be adopted, please? Councillor Vail, second by Councillor Richardson. Deputy Mayor Richardson, sorry. All in favor? That's passed. Flying along here. Consent agenda. Are there any extractions from the consent agenda? It's just some holding provisions being removed. Councillor Vail, you have the consent. Go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Richardson, that all the proposed resolutions shown in section 6.1 of the agenda be approved and adopted by council in the order that they appear on the agenda and sequentially numbered. That's it.
That's it. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. Number 7, other new business. We have none. Bylaws. Any bylaws to be extracted? Seeing none. Councillor O'Reilly, you have the bylaws. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Deputy Mayor Richardson, that the bylaws shown in section 8.1 of the agenda, namely items 8.1.1 and including 8.1.13, be read a first, second, third time, passed, numbered, signed, and the corporate seal attached.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is passed. We are down to item 9, presentations. We have an overview presentation from the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund Committee. I will turn it over to CAO Ron Taylor to get it started. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thank you for the opportunity to introduce this presentation today. As today is a venue where we want to share some accomplishments throughout, it's appropriate for these members of the former Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund to update you on their past accomplishments and transition. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Doug Erlinson. He will introduce the volunteers and team and update you.
Just put that microphone on, Andrew. It's not on. Sorry about that. We were told Doug was speaking and not yourself, so
No worries.
you're throwing us a curveball. Go ahead.
I am the interim chair of the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund. It's our privilege today, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We have a bittersweet announcement to make regarding the trust. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce some of the members that are here today in the room. Many of them have been members for decades with this trust. This trust has been in existence for close to 40 years, and a lot of these members here today have been with this trust from the early days. We have Doug Erlinson. We have Mr. Grant Peters. We have Norma Weatherall, Donna Harvey, and probably one of the longest serving District Chief Dave Kish, and probably one of our longest serving members is Sharon McRae. She was the past chair of the organization, and I'm going to pass it over to Doug to carry on the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Latham, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you this afternoon. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Doug Erlinson. I'm a director with the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund. I'm here with my colleagues today to give you a bit of a briefing on the trust fund, more specifically to formally announce that the decision has been made to disband the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund. This has been discussed with the CAO on a number of occasions over the course of the last few months, so I think you're already aware of it. You're already aware of it from the first few comments that were made. But in discussion with the CAO, we've all felt it was warranted that the actions and the work of the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund be recognized after almost 40 years of service to the community. So that's the purpose of our visit today. So I'm going to speak for just a few minutes about how we arrived at this decision, how and why we arrived at the decision. And then Sharon McRae, who's been involved with the trust fund for virtually all of its 39 years, is going to talk about the trust fund from a bit of a more grassroots perspective. By way of background, and I'm going to read this so that I get it accurately, in October 1983, the Victoria County Council formally authorized the establishment of the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund. It was established to alleviate hardship experienced by various residents within the County of Victoria. The goal was to provide immediate assistance and extra special help to victims of fire and flood, and to ensure that those individuals had a place to stay, food and clothing. Essentially, it was a case of neighbors helping neighbors. The focus was on bridging the gap for the first 24 hours or so after an unfortunate incident, until individuals had an opportunity to contact insurance companies, or until other organizations with more resources and longer-term commitments could take over. I joined the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund just over a year ago. I was asked to volunteer because they were having trouble finding volunteers, and I became a director at the second meeting that I attended, more by default than anything else. At the time, it was proving challenging to find volunteers, and many of the members who had served on the Disaster Trust Fund for many, many years were retiring, and deservedly so. Many had been involved for many, many years, and they were getting to the stage in life where going out to the scene of a fire, often in the middle of the night, was way above and beyond the call. So what started as a discussion about how to recruit volunteers quickly expanded into a broader discussion about other challenges, how to find accommodation, that was becoming more and more challenging, how to pay for accommodation, more specifically how to update a dated voucher system to bring it into the 21st century so that in a day and age when you're paying your waiter for your meal by waving your cell phone at something, we weren't dealing with paper vouchers. Those challenges could have been dealt with and would have been dealt with, But as we peeled back the layers of the onion, it became apparent that there were other challenges that needed to be addressed. There were concerns about liability. There were concerns about volunteers, what would happen if there was an accident or incident en route to or from a scene or at a fire scene, and also concerns about personal safety, dealing with strangers in the middle of the night, often alone or just a couple of volunteers. Substantially different now than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And I think most importantly, in this day and age where PTSD has become something at the forefront, we felt that it was necessary that individuals being involved in this sort of thing had the appropriate training. And none of the individuals on the Disaster Trust Fund had any formal training unless they had received that in their previous careers. So all of that ultimately led to a decision by the board to dissolve the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund. That's not to say the need doesn't exist. It certainly does, and probably more so than it did many, many years ago. But in the opinion of the directors, in today's world, the need should be addressed in a much more formal fashion with trained individuals employed or contracted by the city and sanctioned by the city. In my short tenure with the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund, it's become apparent that the organization has operated pretty much under the radar. That's evident by the fact that the name has never been changed from Victoria County, and also by the fact that when the city amalgamated, it appears that after amalgamation, the organization was never formally recognized by an order in council, if that is in fact the correct terminology. So for the record, I'd like to give Sharon McRae an opportunity to speak on some of the history and some of the work that's been done by the organization. Sharon, as has been mentioned, has been involved with the trust fund for most of its 39 years. Sharon?
Thank you, Doug. I'm only 41, so you can tell I started early. Actually, there were a few people who got this started, and I'm going to go through a few of these slides and hopefully add some ad-lib comments to help you understand how much this organization was part of the community, but unfortunately seldom recognized. There were a number of people who started it, and it's imperative that we give them honor as well. But Mr. Mayor and Mr. CAO and Council, thank you for giving us the opportunity as we close our doors to give honor to the people who started this organization. I did bring some pictures from long ago, but they're out of the newspaper that's now defunct as well, so I don't feel badly. I guess I have to do my own homework here. Next slide. There it is. Okay, for almost 40 decades, the volunteers with the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund have helped make a difference in the lives of those who've experienced a devastating house fire. And in the not too distant past, there was an apartment fire, and we looked after, 50, 60 apartments. And we were helped by the community church and the Salvation Army. Everybody came in and helped out with those things. The volunteers would drive out to the fire day and night and offer support to the families whose lives had just been turned upside down. As Doug said, it was formed in 1983 following a bad fire in Bobcaygeon, and we knew and heard that there was an organization. We modeled ourselves after the organization in the county, now the city, similar to the one in Peterborough. Several county councillors at the time and private citizens got together in somebody's basement and decided that we should get some fundraising done, because you couldn't do this without some money. And they thought if they could raise $60,000, they would be able to sustain the fund. Of course, in those days, the interest rates were a little bit higher, and so it was easy. The organization was, The catalyst for instigating the original organization was Marina McLennan, who was the Reeve of Fenland Falls, Frank Poole, who was the Reeve of Bobcaygeon, Ray Finney, who was the deputy Reeve, I think, of Lindsay, Lloyd Robertson, who was the Reeve of Sturgeon Point, which is probably the smallest municipality that was in the old Victoria County, and Ivan McMillan, who was the Reeve of Eldon. On October the 12th, 1983, as Doug said, the Victoria County Council officially authorized the establishment of the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund and appointed the above as directors to get it started. There was an annual meeting in October where an election of appointees was held and to review the trust's financial position. So we all threw $1 on the table, and that made us a member. There were divisional coordinators established in each of the area townships, which consisted of the fire chiefs and sometimes their spouses and sometimes their youngsters. In their prime, the group had upwards of 50 members who could respond. The one in the room that I remember is the chief's father, Morris Jones. Okay. All that cost money, and the trust fund was funded through fundraisers and contributions of service clubs and municipalities. They organized dances, fashion shows, mail-outs. We went to parades through the towns and villages with a little house, which I don't have with me, but it was a little house and it had donations on it, and it looked like it was a fire house that had had a fire, and people would put their donations in it as we went down the street. We as volunteers didn't want to be responsible for the money, so the archaic method of getting a chit or a piece of paper to give these people to take to a hotel or a restaurant was designed, and the treasurer of the municipality, this county at the time, managed the accounts and the transactions and the investments, and the only thing that was required was the signature of one or two of the people from the Disaster Trust Fund, so we could figure out how things were going. There were about 30 fires in a year when we first started, so kudos to the fire department that went around and made sure everybody had smoke detectors and things like that to help prevent them from being part of the fire account at the end of a year. As the group consisted of volunteers, they were permitted to partner with a place called Home to use their dispatch services. I'm not sure of the year, but I think it was in the 90s. There was a meeting of the city officials, the Salvation Army, a place called Home, and the social services from the city of Kawartha Lakes. And they decided that a place called Home was awake 24 hours a day, and they would take the call from the firemen who were busy at the time. And then they would go down their list of volunteers. Well, it got so we only had 5 or 6, so that's why we're disbanding. When there was a good number of them, it didn't take them long to find somebody who would go out in the night. Seldom did we go by ourselves. The agreement was very beneficial to both of us, I think. We were very lucky when we had a big fire in a couple of the apartments in the town of Lindsay. We were able to use the yards at a place called Home so that we could manage the people, give them the chits that they needed, and get them in touch with their insurance people. They were very much a partner. And it's been good over the years. It helped all of us function efficiently. Most victims are left with not much more than the clothes on their back or their pajamas. And I can recall one incident where they didn't have anything. So thank goodness it was a single man and it was a single person that arrived there, and it wasn't me. The volunteer would help to determine the needs of those involved, whether they needed accommodation. In the early years, there'd be neighbors and they would say, just just come to our place. You'll be fine. So we'd give them a chip for groceries because you're going to be drinking their milk, their coffee, their tea. That doesn't happen anymore. We're very much a society that wants to be independent, so using the hotels in the area was a great idea, except it got so there were fewer and fewer open in the wintertime. When we first started and up until we finished, we always carried a personal care kit with us of Kleenex, tissue, toothbrushes, toothpaste, hairbrush, etc. Initially, when we started up, a box company in Lindsay provided us with a nice carry box, which the firemen sometimes had on their trucks. The group's mandate was to provide assistance to those in need for the first 24 hours, as Doug said. After that, we hoped that somebody else would help kick in. In some cases, individuals and families who have been assisted in the past have made their own donations to this not-for-profit group. When a fire happens, the needs include a place to stay that night or day until they get a hold of their insurance company and figure out how they can move on with their lives after a devastating fire. Anyone who goes through a disaster like that, their brains just don't accept what's going on from the shock, said longtime member Grant Peters. We've had marvelous cooperation with local businesses here, the hotels, the restaurants. Often the chits were never given to us as to account for. The restaurant looked after it. The grocery stores, excuse me, not so much. The department stores, often we didn't get the chits from them either, and the Salvation Army never ever submitted a chit for the clothing. And there was an incident a couple of years ago when all the lady had was the hospital gown they sent her home with, and she couldn't go home. We didn't get called a lot, but when we did, we were there. As most of you know, we could be identified because we had these wonderful little vests. The only money we ever invested on ourselves from the trust fund was a vest. And the vest had a sign on it, and on the back it said Disaster Trust. And when we walked up to a fire, if the police stopped us, we just turned around and went. So they could read Disaster Trust, and they identified us as somebody there to help. And we waited behind the yellow line or behind the tape till the fire person who was in charge, the commander, would bring the clients to us when they were finished with them. Nobody seemed to know about us until they needed us. When it was established that everyone knew everyone else in the smaller communities, but that hasn't happened anymore. And now with the challenges that we had, we thought we knew lots of people. We thought we knew the people in the areas. We couldn't get volunteers. So all the members that are here today would like to thank the past and the present members for their commitment to this communities for almost 40 years. Thank you very much.
Steal the equipment?
Yep.
Okay, Sharon. You operate. You know what to push. So the last formal item that we need to deal with is what to do with the Victoria County Trust Fund bank account. As noted by Sharon, this is money that was raised by the community or by donations with the intention that the money be used to help individuals in the community. What should happen to that money has been the subject of lengthy discussions. We needed to ensure that the money would be used for its intended purpose. And we also didn't want to create a system that was going to require detailed work to manage what turns out to be a relatively small sum in the big scheme of things. So in keeping with the wishes of the individuals who have recently retired from the Victoria County Disaster Trust Fund, the board has made the decision to donate the funds in their entirety to a place called home. As noted by Sharon, a place called home has supported the Disaster Trust Fund for many years, providing accommodation for those in need and also with their 24/7 operation acting as a dispatch center to call out volunteers when they were required. So today the board would like to formally announce that we'll be donating a fund of just shy of $98,000 to be made to a place called home on Monday, the 28th of November. We'd like to, the intent is to invite as many past and present volunteers to that event, and we would like to extend that invitation to members of council and the general public as well. So on that note, I'll close, and my colleagues and I will endeavor to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And again, as you can appreciate, it's been my pleasure to work with this group over the last year, sort of talking through their transition and certainly their legacy that they're leaving behind. I did want to just conclude the presentation by saying that to this council, that this important service will continue. This legacy was built. It was certainly exposed to us in those discussions that it's an important service in that first 24 hours. And so I'm thrilled to update you that we're currently finalizing and working with Red Cross locally to enter into a formal MOU partnership agreement and a current city partnership to respond. We already have a partnership with them for certain recovery services, but we want to capitalize on that and really look for some continued service within that first 24 hours. We expect to have that new partnership completed by year end, and we would be presenting that to council when it is finalized.
Thank you. Council and staff, please join me in thanking the Disaster Trust Fund volunteers, past and present, for supporting vulnerable community members in their time of need and setting the template for this service to continue for years to come. Well done. Let's get a motion to receive with thanks the presentation, and we'll see if there's any questions. Councillor Dunn, second by Councillor Elmsley. Any questions for anyone on the committee or the presenters? Seeing none at this time. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you very much for coming and joining us here today. We're having a small reception at 2 o'clock after council upstairs in the Victoria Room. I'm formally, if you wish to stick around, please join us as a small way of saying thanks. It's an open bar, but there's no booze. Okay? So there's lots to enjoy. So if you're still here at 2 o'clock, please feel free to come up. But if not, thank you for coming today. It's much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, our next presentation is item 9.2. Going to start off with our CAO, Ron Taylor, an overview of council accomplishments 2018 to 2022. Go ahead.
That's great, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to overview with you some of the accomplishments of this council. Before I get into the presentation, I just personally, and certainly on behalf of our senior management team, and really all of city staff, it's just absolutely been a pleasure working with each and every one of you here of council and to support and implement your priorities and initiatives over this term of council. So it's very much appreciated. It was a pleasure. So we're going to go to the next slide, and it's probably the elephant in the room, if you will. If you knew then what we know now, when we you kicked off in 2018, in 2019 you were setting priorities and sort of shifting and moving our work plans. And then early in 2020, things went a little bit sideways, and there was a formal state of emergency. And the majority of your term was managing and dealing with the global pandemic. 2.5 years. And we honestly, you approved your strategic plan in early 2020, and it was actually just 2 months later that the state of emergency was called. And so I want to just go back briefly there, because that was really the commitment that this council and the administration made early in 2020 and for your term. And this is right in the strategic plan. It recognizes council's role as community builders and a commitment to delivering municipal-wide programs and services that meet the needs of the public today and into the future. And then it was followed up by, you've set ambitious goals, and then you'll develop action plans to achieve those goals and monitor your accomplishments. And as always, council will be looking to achieve these goals while balancing affordability and service excellence. And that conclusionary remark really resonated with me. It really guided, not knowing where we were going collectively, but still it sort of framed your approach. And it was, I know in talking with the mayor, when we published the plan in January and the state of emergency was called, we sort of talked about how do we address this sort of elephant in the room, this pandemic, and sort of shift and move and pivot. And so there was an update in the plan, and I want to just read that as well, because I do think it really resonates even today. And especially back then, we were thinking this was sort of a couple of months, we weren't sure, and it was always, it seemed like there was another sort of layer to it, and it just obviously continued on and on. But sort of the update from council through the plan was to respond to the global pandemic and state of emergency created by COVID in 2020. Our priorities were redirected towards the critical and essential services necessary to maintain the health and safety of the community. So you shifted, you moved your priorities, and rightfully so. And while this has caused unexpected changes in the short term, council and the city remain committed to the direction that was outlined in that plan initially and fulfilling those long-term visions. So while we had to all shift and move and respond, there was still that longer term sort of looking at priorities and how we could best deliver them, but certainly differently. The other thing I wanted to just mention in terms of the pandemic, it was an interesting time where partners that maybe we either took for granted, didn't cross paths very often in our municipal work, came to the forefront. So leaders like at our hospital and the health units, they're obviously providing sort of public services sort of throughout, but again, our sort of collective community response really brought other partners and other collaborators to the table. And they were important partnerships. We leaned on them when we needed to, and I think collectively we're much better for it. A couple of other highlights, pandemic related. I would say that this council approved several pandemic recovery programs and relief programs in that immediate term, whether it was for local businesses, resident relief, or just any others in the community generally, organizations. And you also unanimously participated in economic and community recovery task forces and initiatives to make that happen. So you rolled up the sleeves, did what was needed to be done to help and support and transition to a recovery phase in the pandemic, and you should be commended. And most importantly, in my own opinion, when the pandemic started and we were into it for a couple of months, in conversations with the mayor and then follow up with all of you at council, you made the wise decision and gave the direction to manage our budgets, to manage our finances in what I call a self-reliant manner. We weren't looking for handouts at the onset. We wanted to be self-reliant and manage all of the services and operations within our established budgets. And we were able to do that. And again, to me, that's a differentiator that you won't hear very much across the province. And that's really set us well throughout the pandemic and then now into recovery, because you were able to then invest some of that relief monies to initiatives that were really going to accelerate us on the path to recovery. So if we go to the next slide, please. I mentioned that your strategic plan, you set out an ambitious plan, and rightfully so, but had to adjust. And so the plan focused, it's a foundational guide, but it did help to maintain our focus, even going through the unknown. And decisions and investments continued to contribute to maintaining the recovery of the economy, bettering citizen quality of life, the environment, and you did that all through good governance, which was another strategic priority. So what are some of the accomplishments? And so we'll go to the next slide. I've sort of themed them under those strategic priority areas and under a vibrant and growing economy. The non-glamorous sort of work, the plans that were needed to be done, so our growth management planning, our servicing planning, our transportation plans, all of these items, development charges, they're foundational pieces. They guide sort of how we're going to manage growth and development. We know it's here. And so those were important foundational pieces that you either completed or certainly initiated. And while that was happening, infrastructure investments remained through the budgets, so you accelerated and increased investments in roads and bridges, for example. One of the things that came out through the pandemic was, in order to recover, we really needed to accelerate our investment in main streets and downtowns. And following Bob Cajun's lead on their main street in the previous term, then significant investments followed, starting in Lindsay, then Fenelon Falls, and now initiating improvements and investments in Omemee downtowns, all during this 4-year term of council. That's astounding. And I really think that's another legacy piece that's going to really help and accelerate recovery in the community. You established the $1 Million Makeover, and just so you are aware, grants and loans were given for over 60 projects throughout the city, so these were everywhere and anywhere for small businesses. The investment that it triggered or resulted in was over $2 million in project improvements across the city. The innovation cluster that was headquartered previously in Peterborough was established in Lindsay in 2020. It was supporting high-growth clients. Over this term, there was $1.2 million in economic impact that resulted from those business startups and expansions. Ongoing partnership with the 4 chambers. I mentioned before, there's great partnerships established already with these business and community groups. But again, during the pandemic, there was different priorities, different focus, and we all had to lean on each other, and it was no exception with the chambers. There was a number of ambassador programs in downtowns looking at how we could attract and support visitors and get people back to shopping and buying locally. And that partnership also extended not just through the chambers, but our one Lindsay BIA as well. Small Business and Entrepreneurship Center, that's a city function that's funded partially by the province. 90 new business startups during this term of council, which resulted in 139 jobs that were created. And while all this was happening, you were accelerating and supporting, again, vulnerable sectors, so investing back in local arts, culture, and heritage with things, and also like our planning, like the Cultural Master Plan. So again, that's just a snapshot of some of the accomplishments contributing to a growing economy. If we go to the next slide, I want to talk a bit about exceptional quality of life, which is another strategic priority area. And like the previous sort of listing, certainly these are not exhaustive by any means, but I think there's some significant accomplishments that need to be highlighted. 2 new destination parks are completed or substantially completed in this term of council. So that's the Logie Street and Bob Cajun Beach Parks. They will be long-standing legacies in those respective communities and really serve a broader audience and set of visitors than just the local neighborhoods that they're in. You enhance trails and park amenities. That was actually a very clear lesson learned throughout the pandemic, was the sort of public's reliance on outside spaces, on our trails, on our public washrooms that are available there, our playing fields, just to be able to get out, to remain healthy and stay outside. And so some of those were accelerated, and they will continue to be. I think that's a legacy that's been set up through this term. Again, they're not the glamorous, but they are important, these foundational plans, and it's no exception, whether it was the active transportation plan, trails master plan. These are foundational pieces that will help guide our municipal investments ongoing. The Ontario Health Teams was a new initiative through the province, and Kawartha Lakes remained an active member on that board, whether it was through the mayor, through myself, through other staff. And that is a piece that is starting to emerge and ongoing. Again, I mentioned it's interesting to connect with some new partners. They're leaders in our communities, but certainly seeing it through the lens of that overall health systems and how we can partner collectively. It's been an amazing couple of years with them, and we'll continue on there. And all the while, we still have our core services that we want to deliver. So managing and delivering on affordable, supportive, and shelter housing construction occurred over this term of council. We also maintained an exceptional and exemplary long-term care facility, Victoria Manor, throughout the course of the pandemic. And you've heard me before, and you have stated before, that entire team and group should be commended for managing how they did through the pandemic. We launched collectively our community paramedicine program, and that was early in the term. And then it grew dramatically, and I'd like to think that the province sort of saw what we were doing here, and maybe a few others, where we were piloting some of that in-home community paramedic care. And the province has since made that a permanent investment throughout the province, and it's just been a fantastic program overall. And the Summit Wellness Centre, which grew from the Chamber in Coboconk, Norland. We're seeing groundbreaking. We're going to see construction in the next year, and I think that's a very exciting project that this council not only endorsed, but also supported financially as a partner. So we'll go to the next slide, talk briefly about some of the environmental initiatives. And again, I could go on for days, and I won't. I'll save you that. But again, I think that ongoing waste reduction and diversion programs, you know there's a number of changes that are happening provincially. We're staying ahead of the curve on that and trying to be a leader in where we head in terms of waste management. You'll recall in previous term of council, we completed lake management plans, and then this council set out to implement those actions in those plans. So we didn't want them just collecting dust on a shelf. You continued investment in looking at maintaining the health of our lakes and rivers. And as well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we maintained exceptional municipal drinking water and wastewater systems throughout the pandemic, but quite frankly, ongoing. It's been absolutely fabulous, the programming there from staff. We've heightened source water protection programs. There's been citywide septic inspection programs that have been launched over this term of council. Again, these are very important initiatives to maintain a healthy environment. And I'm looking forward to sort of the continued transit investments that you've made. You know that we will be expanding the Lindsay Transit System, and that's forthcoming next year. And while that's been happening, whether it's through the mayor, through council, or through staff, we continue to advocate for regional transit connections, Metrolinx, GO Transit links, and other means of transportation, for example. And I suspect that'll be a legacy that'll continue through the next term of council. And finally, I'll just go to the next slide and we'll talk about good government. And you set that out as a strategic priority and wanted to really focus on a few areas. And so long-term financial planning was one that you had set out to do so that it could inform not just in-year financial decisions, but understanding sort of the context in the longer term. We've been building and expanding on asset management plans. And there's been significant enhanced community engagement. It's really been a lesson learned through the pandemic. We were forced to look at other ways to communicate. We wanted to find ways to continue to allow residents to have access to you, to government, and the decisions that were made. And so we leaned on technology, and a lot of those legacy pieces will also continue on into our business post-pandemic. And we've seen the numbers. We're looking at participation at council meetings, at public meetings, through petitions online. It's astounding. They're triple digits in terms of the percentage increases in that participation. So that's great, and I think that's something we should capitalize on. One of the other areas of good government is to lean on or work with our partners that are also delivering critical infrastructure, try to support them as well. And there's been a lot of investment in Kawartha Lakes more broadly for infrastructure. Broadband and cellular improvements have been occurring citywide, again, throughout the course of this term. And there was even recent announcements, and there'll continue to be announcements into the remainder of this year and next year for sure. Natural gas expansion was a big one that started in Fenelon Falls, and I'm hearing announcements now for expanded natural gas service into Bobcaygeon and to surrounding communities of those two areas. And one of the ones that you invested in, you supported through some fee relief and so on, was the community care campus that hopefully you've seen on Angeline Street. The frame of the building is up. They're consolidating their spaces, and I think that's an absolutely exciting community legacy project to deliver health and wellness programs in the city. Your focus and really requirement for us as city staff to look at our corporate processes, look at improving. We launched, as you know, in previous term, our lean sort of training and development of staff, and we've expanded that dramatically. There are well over 100 staff that are trained in the lean philosophy and consistently looking at process improvements throughout the city, big and small. We also sort of, while you have to do certain plans, we like to do our corporate strategic documents as well to guide the business. And so we've just launched a people strategy, so a human resources focused strategy. We refreshed and updated our IT strategy. We've updated all of our business continuity and emergency management plans. You recently saw our roads plan, our 5-year update there, and you approved and launched a rural consolidated zoning bylaw process. So again, these aren't the glamorous documents at the end of the day, but they are critical. They are so important, and I think they're going to contribute tremendously to our future growth and development. And work continues now and into next year on those strategic priorities that you set out with that strategic plan. And then we'll initiate next year work to refresh and update our next corporate and community strategic plan through 23 and launch it the following year. So I'm just going to conclude then, Mr. Mayor. Probably an obvious, but I think critical and important, just to thank again each and every one of you for your service. You should be commended. Again, I talked about some of the accomplishments that collectively you contributed to or did. There's so many more that I haven't mentioned. Congratulations to all of you for leading this community through and out of the pandemic, while you still maintained the core service delivery that was expected, and you still accomplished, as I just described, several foundational and transformational projects and initiatives. Our community is better for your combined efforts, and you've set the tone for an even better future for Kawartha Lakes. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I will turn it over to you to provide your remarks in closing.
Thank you. Let's get it's kind of amazing when you hear it all summarized like that. Thank you. Let's get a motion to receive the presentation. We'll see if there's any questions first. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Richardson, Councillor Vale. Any questions for Ron on, or the CAO on what he's said nice things about us? All in favor? That's passed. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. So I just want to briefly, just to add a little bit to that, you know, the first term, the previous term of council, which many of you were with me on, you know, we made a couple of bold decisions there too, one being the core service review that we initiated and had the courage to start that much needed conversation in our municipality, which led to some tough decisions need to be being made, but again, I think led to things that needed to be done on council. So, you know, I wanted to recognize that. It wasn't this previous term, it was the term before, but this term certainly carried that through. Also, the previous term of council, which many of you were here for, had the boldness to reduce our council from 17 members to 9, which I thought was a landmark decision across the province. I went to conferences in Ontario and other mayors would come up to me and, you know, I would tell them what we did and they would literally say, you did what? We can't even get our council to have that conversation about good government, good business, you know, streamlining what you need to do as a government. So kudos to you that are here and those that were here previously, that there's not too many places I go where I hear that less government is not a good thing. So back in Victoria County, just as a side note, we had 96 local politicians in the Victoria County and the townships, and now here in the city, and we can all argue on whether it's the right number or not, but we now have 9, you know, local politicians, obviously relying a lot on volunteers and community groups to sort of cover some of those gaps, but I thought that was a really bold decision, so so kudos to that. I just wanted to say to myself that, you know, or to you guys, to myself, council is a team sport. You know, when we work together, we make a good team. I think we've had a great team here this past term of council, and I want to thank you all for that. Council is only part of the team. You know, we have some great staff. We have people here who work together. Any time that we can continue to respect each other and challenge each other, we're going to make good decisions and we're going to move the municipality forward. So hopefully that'll continue. I just want to say thank you for your support and your friendship. It's much appreciated. Your confidence in allowing me to be your mayor. I said I wasn't going to do that. It's been one of the highlights of my life. And I do believe we're leaving the municipality better than we found it, which is a goal. Thank you. Okay, enough about me. Sorry about that. I've got a few congratulations I want to obviously pass on. First, congratulations to Mayor-elect Elmsley, who was elected as our mayor for the next term of council. Congratulations, Doug. I know you'll do well. I want to heartily congratulate Councillors Richardson, Ashmore, and Yeo, who are returning for another term of council. Councillor Yeo, you're starting your 5th term on council, which is no small feat, so good for you. Keep pushing on that wellness center, and we'll be up one day to have a beer with you. All right, buddy? Kathleen, Councillor Seymour Fagan, you brought a very unique perspective to council. You will be missed, and I hope that our friendship will continue for years to come. Do you want to say anything? No, I don't want to make you cry. I just didn't know if you want to say anything. Go ahead.
I do. I just wanted to say thank you for everything. Thank you to staff. Thank you to council. I don't know why I'm crying, because actually there's a few things. I never thought I'd learn so much about roads and potholes and how to gently tell people that there's not a lot we can do about things. So I want to, you know, so staff have been, I think, integral in assisting councillors on their job, because you know, we couldn't do our job without staff, and we couldn't do our job without other councillors helping each other. So the new term of council, I hope everybody can work together just as well. as we have. And yeah, it's been 8 years, and boy, it has been a roller coaster. And I guess over the last few weeks, I never thought that 2 minutes would take so long to say when we had to say something, or 2 minutes would seem so long when you had to hear someone else. But one of the things I also wanted to say that I won't miss is the daily emails that I get from Andy asking for gift cards or money. I know. I don't know why they keep doing that, but thank you for your leadership, Andy. It meant a lot, and you made me cry, and now I'm crying. But yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And the gift cards and the money were spam. They weren't me really asking for money. I want to put that out there. That didn't sound very good, just so you know. Councillor Dunn, I wanted to recognize you, sir. You've had 3 terms as a city councillor and a term on the Town of Lindsay Council before that. You and me haven't always agreed, but you will always have my respect, and I thank you for your service. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess that's the last chance I'm going to say that, so thank you very much. It's been fun. It's been educational. It's been enjoyable. And I look forward to my next adventure.
Sounds good. Thank you. I also do want to recognize Councillor-elect Charles MacDonald is taking over Ward 7. There you go. Pretty good. You want to stand up, Charlie? We'll give you a hand. Welcome. Good job. Please join us in our reception upstairs if you can stick around a little bit just when the meeting's over. I'd appreciate that. Councillor Vail is leaving us for other pursuits, I guess continued pursuits. Councillor Vail, it's been a pleasure working with your business perspective. You didn't speak a whole lot, but when you did, we all sort of sat up and you usually had something very, very interesting to say. Usually. Not every time, but usually. Do you want to say anything, Councillor Vail? Go ahead.
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for your leadership over the last 8 years. I'd like to thank everybody around the table that, we work together on things and ask questions and we're respectful of each other. I think I will miss the meetings with constituents and staff over various issues or items. Good, bad, or indifferent. I always learned something from them, so that I will miss.
Thank you, sir. And last but not least, I just want to recognize Councillor O'Reilly. We will miss your jackets and your clothing, but more importantly, we will miss your leadership and your experience that you brought to council. You were always a friend, always somebody that I could talk to, bounce ideas off of, and that is much appreciated. You've had 5 terms as a city councillor and another term on township council, which again is quite a consideration on the many committees and groups and volunteer organizations, and I'm not sure there's anybody in the city of Kawartha Lakes that doesn't know who you are, which is quite an accomplishment. So well done. You will certainly be missed around the table. Go ahead if you want to say a few words, Pat.
Yeah, I have about a 20-minute speech here, but no, I just want to echo many of the words that have been said here before. I said politics was always in our family, and I guess it started with my dad, who was on Ops Council, as well as myself, and we got to share it with Sharon McRae, who was a member of Ops Council and ward in Victoria County for a number of years, and it certainly was a pleasure to work both starting with Victoria County and then going on to the city of Kawartha Lakes. I think there was many accomplishments in Victoria County, and as you said before, we did good work. And then I think the biggest impact of my term was when was the new council, was when we formed the city of Kawartha Lakes. And I'll never forget the meeting at Victoria Armories when Harry Kitchen stood up and announced there was going to be 16 wards. And I think Harry was trembling and everybody else was kind of in disbelief. But we knew something was going to change, but we didn't really know what it was. So anyway, certainly we moved on from that. I think this council continued the good work from the previous Victoria County. Art Truax, being the first mayor and the last mayor, Lindsay, said the first term of council was like trying to herd cats. And anyway, so trying to get everybody used to the new way of doing business. And then I was on for 8 years with Mayor Rick McGee, and I think we had a number of accomplishments, and I think probably the greatest accomplishment of them all, or one of them, was building the Northwest Trunk, which was certainly something that was discussed for years and years, and Rick and the councils of the day pushed that through, and we're looking at development of close to 4,000 homes on the west side of Lindsay, and a number of commercial developments as well. And now the new council is going to have to build the Northeast Trunk, which is going to maybe bigger than the Northwest Trunk, because there's probably probably between 5,000 to 10,000 homes on the east side of Lindsay. So that's going to be a big chore. And so anyways, I just want to say thanks to everyone, especially Mayor Lethem, for your leadership and your vision, to Ron and your staff, the senior staff, and all the other staff. It certainly was a pleasure working with you, and you build relationships for life. And I think there was only maybe even Jane Pyle's the only one that was probably around longer than I was, since from Victoria County. So Jane, and maybe Wendy Webster, or Wendy Ellis as it is now. So thank you everybody for the wonderful years and the privilege to serve my public life.
Well said, thank you. And yeah. Thank you all for your friendship, and Ron, thanks for yours. Thanks for your guidance, and you're somebody to bounce ideas off of and challenge me, and I could certainly challenge you. And I think a big part of these accomplishments is our ability to work together, and council's ability to work together with staff. So I think we're something we can all be proud of. Thank you. Okay, item 10, confirming bylaw. Councillor Yeo, if you would.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Elmsley that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a regular council meeting held Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, be read a first, second, third time passed, numbered, signed, and the corporate seal attached.
Thank you. All in favor? That's passed. And Councillor O'Reilly, would you do the honor of adjourning the last council meeting of this session? Moved by Councillor O'Reilly, second by Councillor Dunn. All in favor? That's passed. We are out. Thanks, folks. And we'll have a brief reception upstairs if you want to join us in the Victoria Room, and we can have a chat and a non-alcoholic beverage. Thank you.